Here's another walk through the more indie and international side of horror that normally gets snubbed by those who cover only the bigger budgeted projects. Let's start binging. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. First up, we have The Curse of Wolf Mountain, aka Wolf Mountain. It's new on demand and digital download from UNcork'd Entertainment. It's directed by David Lipper and written by Keli Price. After surviving the mysterious death of his parents on a camping trip as a child, AJ, played by Keli Price, who also wrote the film, and his brother Max, played by David Lipper, who also directed the film, joined their significant others and a few friends on a return trip to the very place their deaths occurred, Wolf Mountain. Meanwhile, a trio of inmates have escaped from a local prison, one of them played by the one and only Danny Trejo. It appears there's a more dangerous predator hunting the mountain, and it's looking for more prey. The best I can say about The Curse of Wolf Mountain is that, all around, it's decently acted. In fact, the acting is better than most movies of this caliber. So I was thankful that although the plot is predictable and the action is quite light, at least the players made things somewhat believable. Aside from that, there is some very hit-and-miss gore. Some of the kills seem to have required quite a lot of work put into them, others are uninspired. It really seems like there was an intention to make each kill memorable, but really, I can only recall one of them, and I just finished the film. Though they are at the top of the credits and featured prominently on the poster and trailer, both Tobin Bell and Danny Trejo only have a few minutes of screen time, and most likely did their scenes in a single day. Trejo has a meatier part, as he at least gets a few scenes as the escaped prisoner. Bell only gets a few moments as AJ's therapist, so fans of either actor will find themselves wanting. While some of the other character work is okay, the story really goes nowhere. Multiple scenes dedicated to G-rated sex scenes threaten to titillate, but only end up disappointing as the film lacks the teeth to even deliver some solid nudity. Why have multiple sex scenes and no nudity? These scenes seem to have just been added to pad out the film. As is, The Curse of Wolf Mountain is a noble effort that seems to have started out with an inkling of what kind of tone they were working for, but either due to budget or inexperience, it fails to really provide anything memorable or worth recommending. Whisper is streaming on Amazon Prime and Tubi. It's directed by Jolley and written by Robert Dunn and Christopher Jolley. Assigned to watch over a patient in a coma, which also involves being alone in a dark house, a nurse, played by Linda Louise Duan, begins nosing around and uncovers a plot to unleash dark forces from within the mind. But one of the patients, the one in the coma, was more successful than most at accessing this dark entity, and it begins haunting the nurse as well. Whisper turns out to be a wonderful mix of classic coma horror, like Patrick, and David Holroyd's The Haunted, a film I liked quite a bit from 2018, by way of Ty West's House of the Devil. It takes advantage of the dark corners of the house to cause a strong foreboding sense of unease, even before the scary stuff begins. Once that does occur, the subtle effects and tight, shadowy camera work makes the entire experience something that'll be sure to cause a tingle or two in your spine. This is a very low-budget movie, but it really envelops the viewer with a sense of urgency. Something is stalking the woman, and it's not going to end well for her. That's obvious. I like the way the effects are held back to the periphery and only used when it can cause the maximum of scares. The actual dark entity is quite frightening looking when it appears in the final moments, making the wait worth it. This is the first of 2 Christopher Jolley films I plan on checking out. Whisper tells a somewhat complex story with simple nuance and some tried and true plays with shadows and light used in many a haunted house movie, and it works darn well. Distress Signals is new on-demand and digital download from Dark Sky Films. It's directed and written by Terence Krey and Christine Nyland. Caroline, played by Christine Nyland, gets separated from her camping group, falls down a ravine, and dislocates her shoulder. Lost and afraid in the woods, Caroline is determined to survive, but the odds are against her, and she soon finds that she might not be as alone as she thinks she is. Distress Signals is a very, very simple movie. It's also an effective one. I really am kind of in awe at how uncomplicated this film is in terms of what it accomplishes with so very little put into the budget. Boiled down to basics, Distress Signals is a woman lost and walking around in the woods. For most of its runtime, she is lost, wounded, and just walking around. I know that doesn't sound like a very entertaining movie, but Christine Nyland manages to keep things entertaining with very little dialogue. She's simply in a very bad situation and desperate to survive. But somehow, Nyland and Terence Krey, who both wrote and directed Distress Signals, keeps things at a minimum, yet I never felt bored by what I was seeing. Things do, of course, take a turn in the last 20 minutes when it becomes clear Caroline is not alone in the woods. This works as it doesn't go too far into the intentions of what she encounters in the woods. That is simply another obstacle Caroline has to overcome. There's also a very clear twist as Caroline seems to have been lying to herself for this entire trip, making this more of an existential road to discovery for the character. I love stories told from the perspective of the unreliable narrator, where the focus of the story isn't upfront with themselves. It makes things feel more real and honest. I also really enjoyed the way the end credits were dispersed as Caroline begins nearing the end of this harrowing adventure. It made for an interesting way to keep you riveted right up until the last moments of screen time. I didn't expect to be as enthralled with this story as I was. It's just a woman walking around in the woods, which, as long as you find the right woods, really costs very little in terms of budget. A little bruise makeup and the cost of the camera, and bam, this movie is made. It's inspiring that this filmmaking team is able to get so much out of a simple story matched with a no-frills production. While it's something I've seen before, I think Distress Signals is a film creatives should pay attention to in terms of what they are able to accomplish with strong character and strong writing. Don't Say Its Name is streaming on Tubi. It's directed by Rubin Martell and written by Rubin Martell and Gerald Wexler. In the cold tundra of Canada, when a native woman is found dead on the side of the road, a series of mysterious murders begin. The murderer is seemingly a Wendigo, an invisible predator that can only be seen by their victims before they die, and gets stronger with every victim. A local sheriff, played by Madison Walsh, and her deputized friend and ex-soldier, played by Sarah Lice MacArthur, attempt to piece together the mystery, incorporating a local native legend with their military and police training before more bodies pile up. So I've read and seen quite a few movies about Wendigo, especially of late with the popularity of Antlers, but I've never really heard of a Wendigo. So right off the bat, I want to give props to this movie for featuring a creature that hasn't been overused in cinema. In fact, I'm not sure there's any movie that features this legend from Canada's indigenous population. It just goes to show you that no matter how many horror movies are made, legend and the creative mind can still come up with new ways to scare. While the rules of the Wendigo are played fast and loose, especially towards the end, I like the way the monster manifests itself physically and then disappears into the environment. But Don't Say Its Name is not just a simple monster movie. It's actually quite an intriguing mystery, a police procedural that measures the balance between investigative training and inner intuition. Being a native herself, Sheriff Stonechild is familiar with the legend, but she is a professional and sticks to looking to the facts. Newly deputized Stacy Cole, played by MacArthur, was a military tracker, but again feels that the killer is very reminiscent of old legends. These officers want to rely on their training, but familiarity to their ancestral lore steers them away from it. It's a wonderful theme to explore as it represents what most indigenous people must feel as they struggle to follow modern mores versus their traditions. That's a deeper theme than one often finds in most horror movies, and it was appreciated in Don't Say Its Name. That heft makes the film resonate a lot more than your typical monster in the woods tale. The creature itself is pretty impressive, as the film incorporates CGI and practical effects pretty nicely. Appearing ghostly, then disappearing, the Wendigo leaves gory remains of its victims. It's not over the top, but bloodier than most modern creature features. The acting is top tier, and much better than other films of this B-grade level of monster movie. Madison Walsh is personable and no-nonsense as the sheriff, who has responsibilities of her own by taking care of her teenage nephew at home. Sarah Liz MacArthur is downright stunning, even roughed up and packed into snow gear. She delivers a tough-as-nails performance as the deputized ex-soldier with scars of her own that she needs to deal with. There's an attention to character in Don't Say Its Name that really elevates it. Things kind of get wobbly towards the end as the Wendigo, which was ethereal and invisible, soon becomes tangible and able to be shot. They attempt to explain it away, but it feels like the rulebook is tossed aside just so the officers can have some kind of chance in the climactic fight. Aside from the wonky ending and the fact that there's some very generic soundtrack music going on throughout the film, Don't Say Its Name is a top-notch thriller/horror/police procedural that shouldn't be missed by those who like a little thematic heft in their creature features. A big thanks to executive producer David Bond for recommending I check this one out. He reached out to me quite a while ago, and because of my many requests, this one kept on getting shuffled around in the queue. Better late than never, though, I guess. Tin and Tina is new streaming on Netflix. It's directed and written by Rubin Stein. After experiencing a miscarriage on the day of their wedding, newlyweds Lola, played by Milena Smith, and Adolfo, played by Jaime Lorente, decide they want to adopt. They meet albino twins Tin, played by Carlos Gonzalez Moroleon, and Tina, Anastasia Russo, at a local orphanage, and immediately decide to bring the pair home to live with them. But even on their ride home from the orphanage, the twins begin to exhibit strange behavior. They are devout believers in the Bible, but lack the maturity to discern it's a book of guidance and not fact. This literal understanding of the Bible begins to wear on the non-religious couple, and strange and unfortunate occurrences start happening in and around their home, giving the couple doubts about adopting the twins. Tin and Tina is your typical evil child movie. It's littered with details that have become cliched through the years of bad kid movies and all other horror movies for that matter. This is not a badly made movie. There are quite a few well-constructed scenes and shots that are quite mesmerizing, but these moments are punctuated by things we all have seen too many times before. First off, whenever you see an animal in these types of films, in the past that means the dog, cat, gerbil, whatever, is toast. It's a trivial way to evoke sympathy to have a trusted animal murdered just to up the threat level and kill count. Modern Hollywood movies seem to have understood the point, and the trendy, ironic thing to do these days is to have the animal in peril, but somehow come out without a scratch by the end. I'll take that any old day. But Spain doesn't seem to have gotten the memo, and when the dog that dislikes the kids is introduced, the label dog meat almost appears above the poor pooch's head. It's just cheap, and an aspect of horror that I hope continues to dwindle in appearances. The kids alternate from being angelic to creepy pretty easily. It helps that Tin, played by Carlos Gonzalez Moroleon, has a strained smile stretched across his face most of the time. Tina, played by Anastasia Russo, is the savvier of the two, and while these two seem to hide behind the veil of innocent misunderstanding of the Word of God, there does seem to be a more devious side to their actions. While killer kid films are a dime a dozen, Tin and Tina at least offers up a religious angle to the mix that separates it from the norm. I guess if I had to compare it to something, I'd say it reminded me a bit of Alice Sweet Alice in the way it incorporates religious iconography and warped religious beliefs into the narrative. Still, every other cliché occurs outside of that. Adolfo is an airline pilot, meaning he is constantly away from home, so of course when Lola expresses concerns about the two creepy-ass children, he doesn't believe her and dismisses her worries. For once, I wish the husband would listen to the concerned mother, and they would just drop the kids off someplace far, far away so that they could never find their way home. But no, the woman is left to fend for herself against the absent husband. I guess this most likely is some kind of comment about the differences in parenting and the role the mother and father play in a child's life. but it's such a trope that I roll my eyes every time I see it, and I don't want to waste brainwaves trying to get to the bottom of this tiresome cliche. Teen and Tina is not a total wash. There are a few scenes I found to be quite shocking and disturbing, as when the kids attempt to see God by trying to strangle each other with a paper bag and get as close to death as they can. I wish there were more scenes of this nature so as to set it apart from others in the evil child subgenre. But apart from the heavy religious overtones, there's not much distinguishing it. On top of that, Teen and Tina has a 2-hour runtime, and believe me, you feel the drag all the way through. A good 45 minutes could be shaved off, and it wouldn't even affect the plot. The music is truly odd in this one as well. A lot of the songs contradict the tone of the events going on in the movie. The irony of some of the instances work, but other times it makes for just a weird juxtaposition. On top of that, there's a scene where Teen and Tina act out an Asian song for their mother and pull their eyes back to look like Asian kids. In this culturally charged day and age, I was really surprised to see it appear on Netflix, which has proven to be hypersensitive to that sort of thing. For some reason, Teen and Tina was set in 1981 Spain after a bloody political revolution. But not knowing many details about this occurrence, the gravity of why this story is set in this area went over my head. I guess this film might have had something to do with the end of one set of beliefs or politics and the beginning of a new one, and that blood needs to be spilled for any kind of real change to occur. I can see that theme working, but it's so scant in the actual narrative, I think it could have been one of those details edited out and it wouldn't even have affected the movie. If you're looking for textbook horror that you've seen time and time again, Teen and Tina is there for you. Sure, the kids are creepy, but really, it's nothing new. While the film bares its teeth occasionally, its adherence to so many cliches really makes it ultimately forgettable. Finally, what I think is the best of the bunch this time around is The Devil Comes at Night. It's new on demand, digital download, and DVD from UNcork'd Entertainment. It's directed by Scott Lever and written by Ryan Allen, Adrienne Kress, and Scott Lever. A former boxer named Ben, played by co-writer Ryan Allen, arrives in a small town to search through his deceased father's things in hopes to find much-needed cash. With him is his former trainer, Jack, played by Elias Zaru, who helped raise Ben and now has cancer, which is why they're looking for money in the first place. But once they get into town, Ben, a former addict, finds himself drugged and trapped in his father's house with townsfolk outside taunting him to come out into the dark. At first, Ben believes the townsfolk are racists, looking to do some down-home justice to the first black man they've seen in a while. But after finding Amy, co-writer Adrienne Kress, hiding on the second floor, and discovering that the people outside refuse to enter the house, even though the door is wide open, Ben begins to understand that something more supernatural might be going on. As the night continues, more townspeople gather outside, and Ben begins uncovering his father's deep-buried secrets involving a desecrated church and an evil cult. So yeah, there's a whole lot of story going on in The Devil Comes at Night, and while I'm used to indie horror films being underwritten and full of holes, it is refreshing to see a story so soundly written with some solid attention to character and detail. The trio of Ryan Allen, Adrienne Kress, and director Scott Lever add layer upon layer to this story that unfolds rather delicately through this complex story. There are nuances attended to, such as the racism angle, which, while justified, I feel was hung on to for too long by the film's lead, as it's quite obvious something past the color of Ben's skin is afoot here. But I like the way the film achieved being able to tell an expansive story while sticking to one location, simply using phone calls, news clippings, and word of mouth to explain what is happening outside of the house and how it's spreading across the small town. But while the story is soundproof and unravels logically, I did feel as if the ending was overwritten and took a twist that really didn't need to happen. Again, I'm impressed because way too many indie films simply end with a cliffhanger that will never be addressed in a never-made sequel, or worse yet, a quick ending that doesn't make a lick of sense, as if the rental company pulled the plug on the entire operation before it was all done. The ending of The Devil Comes at Night is again very sound, but feels like it wraps things up and wants to be a little too clever for its own good. That said, for a cast of unknowns, everyone does a really good job with their roles. Allen is likable as Ben, giving a nuanced performance of a flawed character you can root for. Kress is also strong as Amy, who shows strength and knowledge, but also recognizes that the threat is bigger than she can take on physically. Having the writers play the characters they wrote seems to have lent those leads the insight to slip into these roles with ease. Even the quiet menace of the cult leader, played by Jason Martorino, never goes over the top and manages to be a threatening presence even though he's just a guy standing in the dark. The Devil Comes at Night has very little effects and relies on the surrounding darkness to set a dire and treacherous mood. While there is very little blood, the threat is real, as Ben does endure some great damage via the blade-wielding locals. The Devil Comes at Night feels like a pandemic-made film using limited sets, effects, and resources, but relying on the strongest fundamentals of filmmaking, that of strong performances and strong storytelling. I wish more indie movies would be more like this one.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're doomed. Oh, you're doomed. You're